Bum, bum, bum. Right, evening everybody. It is Saturday, the 8th of October, and we shall crack on with some Irish, because I've got 6 left to go of my little run of Irish. And we have done our blended Irish whiskies, which took up the majority of them. So we'll go on to single malts. Single malts, not pot still Irish, which we'll move on at the end. Although the one after this one that I'm about to do is a single malt, although it says pot still on the label, but I'm not sure if it is. But we'll get to that one in a bit. So this one is a Drinks by the Dram wee sample. Not a wee sample, obviously, it's a whiskey sample. Wee as in small, not as in P. And this was another generous donation from my good friends Chris Cook and his wife Lindsay. Thank you very much. And this is Knappogue Castle, 12-year-old. Now Knappogue Castle is here. It's County Clare, and it was a castle that was built in 1467 by the Clan McNamara, apparently. Now in 1966 it was bought by a guy called Mark Andrews, who bought it with his wife Lavon, and he began to collect a rather hefty private collection of Irish whiskies, particularly single malts. And he was very interested in a distillery that was called the B. Daly Distillery, which was in County Offaly, which is here, which is basically where the Tullamore distillery, was it a distillery? Was. Yes, is Tullamore Distillery, which is where Tullamore DEW came from, that we have covered in the blended run. And he was really interested in this, and he basically started collecting all these whiskies, and there was still stock around of B. Daly because it closed in 1954, ceased production, closed down, and he was acquiring all of the stocks that they had with a view of bottling it himself. So because Knappogue Castle was where he lived, it was known as Knappogue Castle 1951. Now, his son, who was also called Mark, set up a company called Great Spirits in 1998, and that merged into a company called Castle Brands in 2003. And Castle Brands is now quite a big drinks distributor as well as producer. So we've actually covered one of their other brands, which was Clontarf, and they also own the Jefferson's bourbon range. So they're not a massive drinks company, but they've got they're a decent size. And Knappogue Castle continued as one of their key brands. Now, up to 2010, it was released as vintages. So it was distilled in a certain year and then bottled in another year, and that would give you the age. And in 2010 it then changed into a regular 12-year-old, which is what this is and what the bottle looks like now. Master and Malt are selling this for 43 quid. You're looking at about 40 to 45 quid a bottle. So there isn't a distillery at Knappogue Castle, so it's actually made by Bushmills. It's if you read in some places it's a distillery, it's made in a distillery in Northern Ireland. Now, until very recently, I actually bit my tongue at that point, until very recently it was that was the only distillery that was in Northern Ireland. So it is a single malt from the Bushmills distillery that's bottled under the Knappogue Castle label. Now, Bushmills double distill the single malts that they make, so it's slightly different. Sorry, they don't double distill, they triple distill. I'm actually thinking of Cooley, the other distillery that has been mentioned. Cooley double distill, Bushmills triple distill. So it's a triple distilled single malt. It's bourbon matured. Now, it's entirely possible that they are using bourbon casks from Jefferson's, who themselves are buying it from elsewhere, but that could be where they're sourcing the casks to mature their whiskey. So they might be buying the stock from Bushmills or sending casks to Bushmills and getting them to mature it in those casks. They don't use colour. It's one of the very few Irish whiskies that I've come across where they mention there is no colour added, which kind of implies that other Irish whiskies are using colour, but there doesn't seem to be as big a deal about using colour as there is with Scotch. 40%, if I've mentioned that already, and that's really about it. It's another one of these sort of Irish whiskies that give you the impression that there is lots and lots of Irish whiskey distilleries, and until recently there wasn't. There was 4 of them. So This is not relatively new, but it's not massively prevalent. It's not massively prevalent in the market. It's sort of a bit of a unknown quantity. You know, you're not going to find this in many places that have a decent Irish whiskey range, because there's not a huge amount that's actually made. So in terms of colour, it is quite light, but it's still, you know, a decent white winey colour. It's not particularly dark, but it's not obvious that it's not had colouring added to it. Interesting. There is a bit of a bourbon character to it on the nose, but there's a slight saltiness to it as well. And in all honesty, you wouldn't say it's obviously Irish. There is a maltiness to it, but there is a fresh mint feel and a slight sea salt element as well. You could easily nose this blind and think it's Scotch. It's that minty freshness to it. It's actually really pleasant. But there's nothing that screams Irish whiskey to it, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, it would be interesting having this blind and people nosing it and trying to figure out where it's from. It's kind of Scotchy on the nose as well. It's not obviously Irish. Again, this sweet mintiness comes through. And there's a sugary character to it. It's like a sugar syrup. It's not cloying, but it's a light sugar syrup, almost like a sugar solution feel to it. There's a really nice sweetness to it, but it's quite a light, delicate, almost a pure sugar sweetness as well. It's not cloying. It's not like kiddie sweets or toffee or anything like that. There's a really nice lightness to it. But there's also this slight freshness that reminds me a little bit of sea air. It's not overly salty. It's not quite as salty on the palate as it is on the nose. But it reminds me a little bit of almost like a coastal Scotch. It's not massively dissimilar to something like Old Polney. There's a lightness to it. There's a delicate feel. I could try this blind and think this was Scotch. I honestly could. There was a bit of a prickle coming through there of a bit more saltiness, and it's sea salt as well. But there's this, the sugary, it's a pure clean sugar solution, which is really fresh and light. And with that saltiness as well, it's a delicate whiskey. This is quite summery. It really is quite a light, almost zesty, but it's not citrus. It's zesty as in kind of like just, I don't know if I said it's a summery whiskey. It's kind of spring-like. It's fresh and bouncy and light and like gambling, and it's a really nice whiskey. It's really, really good. It's not got a great deal of weight to it. It might be too light for some, but this is extremely pleasant. Very, very nice indeed. I do like that. It's got a freshness to it, which is really invigorating. And the finish isn't huge, but what there is just a continuation of the flavours. It doesn't really change much, but what's there is pleasant. It is a very, very nice whiskey for sitting in the sunshine. I am very pleasantly surprised by that. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting a great deal, but it's a spring, summer, sitting in the sunshine whiskey, in the warmth, in the back garden. You've had a hard day at work and you're just chilling out, and you've had salmon and salad for tea, and you're having that afterwards just to chill and unwind. It's quite it's quite refreshing. It's, you know, it's kind of like a equivalent of a gin and tonic, but in whiskey form. It's light, it's relaxing, it's refreshing. It's actually quite a refreshing whiskey. I'm really impressed with that, surprisingly so. 40 quid is, it felt to me initially like it was a steep price, but actually for a 12-year-old single malt Scotch, 40 quid's not that bad a price as well. And I think that's got enough interesting things about it, this light, refreshing character, that it holds its own. And you would have a lot of fun putting that in a blind tasting. If you lined up a load of Scotch and said, and didn't say that there was an Irish in there, a lot of people would pick that as a Scotch straight off the bat. Nice stuff. Very, very interesting indeed. I like it when it's a nice surprise. Right, we'll do a quick rinse out, and then we should crack on with another one that I'm pretty certain is a single malt, but I'm not 100% certain. So I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.